You look at the photo you just took, and the sunset's more orange than it actually was 2 seconds ago, and that's not a filter, and it's not your imagination. Somebody already decided how that photo should look before you ever saw it, and it happens to every picture you take, your friend's face included, not just the ones you edit. So what's your phone actually doing to a photo in between the tap and the moment you finally see it? So what happens to that grid once the merge is actually done? We already covered the merge itself back in the last video. But the grid that comes out of it still isn't the photo sitting in your gallery. Google actually named the next part in its own engineering write-up, and it isn't shy about it. It calls that part finishing, and finishing isn't one adjustment. It's a fixed sequence, run in the same order every single time, and at least one move in that sequence decides how bright your shadows are allowed to get before you ever see the picture. Start with that shadow move because it's the biggest single thing in the whole sequence. The scene in front of you, a bright sky and a shaded face at the same time, holds a lot more range of light than your screen can actually display. So the phone builds a map of the whole image and squeezes that range down, brightening the darkest parts and holding back the brightest ones until all of it fits inside what a screen can show. Do that badly and a photo goes flat. All the texture crushed right out of it. So the real work isn't the squeeze itself, it's protecting the fine detail while the squeeze happens, holding on to edges and texture even as the big picture gets compressed. That's the actual reason you can see your friend's face and the sunset behind them, both in the same frame. But brightening shadows and holding back highlights only fixes how light and dark sit in the picture. It says nothing about color, and color gets its own push too. One of Apple's own engineers actually wrote this down in a patent. Increasing color saturation and contrast generally makes a more pleasing image. So they push it on purpose on every photo. But push saturation the same amount everywhere, and skin turns an ugly, overly red tint, because skin is exactly the color that push hits hardest. So the same patent describes finding the skin in the photo first and giving it a smaller push than everything else around it, blended in gradually enough that you'd never spot the seam. Your photo isn't more colorful by accident. It's more colorful on purpose, with your own face quietly exempted from most of it. So is there any way to actually see a photo before any of this happens? There is, and phone makers built it on purpose. They just don't turn it on by default. Apple's own support page describes its raw photo format as the sensor's information along with iPhone processing. The same phrase they use for an ordinary photo, except RAW holds most of that processing back, still there for you to apply by hand instead. Turn it on, and the photo that comes out looks flatter, a little gray, almost disappointing next to what you're used to. That flatness isn't a mistake, it's the missing steps, the ones you've been looking at your whole life without knowing they were ever there. So the next time a sunset in your camera roll looks a little more orange than the one you actually stood under, or a friend's face looks a little smoother than it did 2 feet away, you're not misremembering, and your phone isn't lying to you either. You're looking at a photo somebody already finished on purpose before it ever reached you. The shadows opened up, the highlights held back, the color pushed everywhere, except the one place a push would look wrong. The sensor took the light. The phone decided what it should look like. And the only one of those two you ever actually saw was the second one.
Everything you just figured out rests on something deeper, and that's the next video, so start there. Would you rather understand your computer than just use it? Then subscribe, and I'll see you next time, further down the stack.